She came out of someone else's house, and 5 men followed her. What was she doing there? And we have a 1-year-old child at home. I never claimed to be a perfect husband or a perfect father, but I tried every single day. I was the one who got up first in the morning, warmed up the baby's milk, changed the diapers even when I could barely keep my eyes open, and paced the living room in circles when our son couldn't sleep at night. That night wasn't any different, at least not at the start. The baby had finally fallen asleep in my arms, his tiny head nestled against my chest, his breath warm and steady. I remember staring at the ceiling in the dim light, listening to the soft ticking of the wall clock, thinking about how exhausted I was, but how full my heart felt holding him. She came out of the bedroom in a tight black dress, already halfway through applying her lipstick. I looked up slowly, confused. "Where are you going?" I asked, even though I already knew. She'd mentioned the club earlier that week, but I'd brushed it off, assuming she wasn't serious. She didn't look at me, just checked a reflection in the mirror near the door. "I told you, the girls want to go out. I need a break." "A break," I echoed, lowering my voice so I wouldn't wake the baby. "You had a break last weekend when I stayed home, and you went out with Mira." She glanced at me over her shoulder. "That wasn't a break. That was dinner." "Dinner at 3 in the morning?" I asked. "Come on, don't do this. Stay home tonight." "I need this," she said flatly, like it was an excuse she practiced. "I never get to go anywhere anymore. All I do is cook, clean, and change diapers." That part stung more than I expected, because lately most of that had been me. But I didn't say it. Instead, I stood there with our son in my arms, watching her pick up her purse like she was walking out for groceries, not like she was leaving her family behind for the night. She turned to me at the door, hand on the handle. "Don't start with a guilt trip. I'm tired too. I need this. Just let me have one night." And then she left. No kiss for the baby. No kiss for me. Just the soft click of the door shutting behind her. I waited and waited. Hours passed. Midnight turned into 2 a.m., then 3. I sat on the couch, the baby monitor silent beside me, my phone untouched in my hand. Her location was still visible on our shared app, some house outside the city, not the club, not anywhere near it. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. I zoomed in, a residential street, a quiet suburb. She'd been there for over 2 hours now. I didn't call. I didn't text. But I didn't sleep either. By sunrise, I was dressed, the baby fed and in his car seat. I drove slowly, each mile thick with tension I couldn't name. I didn't even know what I was hoping to find. An explanation? A misunderstanding? When I pulled up to the address, I stayed in the car for a while, engine off, just watching. The house was still. A 2-story place with a worn fence and a broken porch light. And then, at exactly 7:02 a.m., the door opened. She stepped out first. Her hair was messy. Her mascara smudged down her cheeks like she'd been crying, or more likely, drunk and careless. She had no jacket, no purse in sight, just her phone in hand. Behind her came a girl in heels, adjusting her bra strap. And then 3 men followed, laughing, saying something I couldn't hear. One of them kissed my wife on the cheek. I felt something cold slide down my spine. She turned toward the street, looked both ways, and then started walking down the sidewalk like nothing had happened. No shame, no urgency. She didn't see me. Not yet. I stepped out of the car, and she froze. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her face drained of color. She looked like a child caught doing something they didn't even bother hiding. I didn't speak. I just watched her. Let her say whatever came next. "It's not what it looks like," she said softly, running a hand through her tangled hair. I swear nothing happened. We were just talking. I drank too much. I didn't want to drive. I didn't respond. "You're overreacting," she added. "Please don't make a scene." A scene, as if me standing there with our child in the back seat was somehow the problem. She stepped closer. "Let's go home, okay? Please." I looked at her, really looked. The smeared makeup, the smell of alcohol radiating off her, the way she couldn't meet my eyes for longer than a second. No, I said. That one word changed everything. We drove home in silence. She kept her distance. I carried our son inside, laid him down gently in his crib. She sat at the kitchen table, head in her hands. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "But nothing happened. I promise." I stood across from her, arms folded. "You forgot your underwear," I said. She blinked. "What?" "You left them there." I saw one of the guys laughing, holding them up like a trophy. Her face crumpled. Silence stretched between us like a chasm. "I'm going to talk to a lawyer," I said, "and you'll be hearing from them soon." She looked up sharply. "What? No, please, you can't take him from me." "I'm not taking him from you," I said quietly. "You left him. You just didn't expect to be caught." That night, I slept on the floor next to my son's crib. And for the first time since becoming a father, I didn't feel exhausted. I felt wide awake. Because the woman I thought I knew, the woman I trusted with my life, with our child, wasn't coming back. And now, I had only one thing left to protect. Our son. The day after she came home from that house, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do. She tiptoed around the apartment like a stranger, barely speaking, barely meeting my eyes. Every time I looked at her, it was like I was seeing a ghost, someone who looked like my wife but had nothing in common with the woman I married. She tried to act normal, made coffee, folded some laundry, even offered to take the baby for a walk. But I said no. I didn't trust her with him anymore. And the worst part was, she knew it. That evening, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, her voice soft and cracked. "Please, let's not destroy everything over one night." I stared at her. "You didn't destroy everything in one night," I said. "You did that the moment you looked me in the eye and lied." She had nothing to say to that, just lowered her head and nodded like she knew it was true. I started documenting things immediately. Photos, messages, screenshots of her location history. I wasn't sure how custody courts work, but I knew I needed evidence. Real evidence, not just feelings or suspicions. I called a lawyer the next morning. He listened patiently as I explained everything, from the night she left to what I saw outside that house. "Did she admit to anything?" he asked. "No," I said. "She just kept saying nothing happened. But I know she's lying." "Well," he said, "we don't need a confession. We need a pattern. Was this the first time she left a child alone with you to go out?" "No, there were a few nights before, but I never made a big deal of it. I figured she needed space." He was quiet for a moment. "It's time to make a big deal now." Over the next few days, I did everything by the book. I took care of our son like always, fed him, bathed him, played with him. I kept receipts, marked times, saved every photo. She, on the other hand, started slipping, coming home late, ignoring feedings, losing patience when the baby cried. She still tried to pretend things were normal, but I could see the guilt eating her from the inside. And maybe something else. Fear. Sometimes she'd catch me watching her from across the room and say, "You're treating me like I'm the enemy." And I'd say nothing, because I wasn't treating her like anything. I was simply watching what was already there. One night, after putting the baby to sleep, I found her crying in the bathroom. She was sitting on the floor, knees to her chest. "I don't know what's wrong with me," she said. "I never wanted to be that person." I knelt beside her, but didn't reach out. "Then why did you become her?" I asked. She had no answer, just tears. A week later, I filed a custody request. It wasn't easy. It wasn't something I ever imagined myself doing. But I knew if I didn't act now, I'd always wonder if I failed my son by staying silent. The lawyer submitted the motion. Emergency guardianship, based on neglect and instability. When she got served, she screamed. "You're taking my baby from me?" she shouted, shaking the papers in my face. "After everything we've been through?" "You took yourself from us," I said. "The baby just comes with me." Her fury cracked like glass. She threw things, slammed the door. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I just picked up my son, and held him while she sobbed on the other side of the wall. The court hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Until then, the judge granted me temporary sole custody. She was allowed supervised visits twice a week. At first, she tried to act like she didn't care, showed up late, wore sunglasses to hide her face. But the third visit broke her. She held our son like she hadn't touched him in years. She whispered things to him I couldn't hear. Her hands trembled. She looked like someone watching her world collapse in slow motion. I didn't feel joy in it. I didn't feel revenge. Just sadness. Deep, hollow sadness. Because there was a time, not that long ago, when I thought we'd raise this child together. That we'd grow old, side by side, watching him become a man. But that future died the night she walked out. On the day of the hearing, I stood in front of the judge with a folder full of proof. Timestamps, images, statements from neighbors who'd seen her stumble home drunk, missed doctor appointments, everything. She stood on the other side, pale and shaking, her lawyer trying to paint a picture of a tired, overwhelmed mother. But the judge wasn't moved. Parenting is not something you take a break from. The judge said coldly, "You don't walk out in the middle of the night and leave a baby behind to go party." My lawyer didn't even need to speak much. The facts spoke loud enough. When the gavel came down, I was awarded full custody. No shared custody. No equal weekends. Just me, full guardian. That night, I packed our things. Not just the babies. Mine, too. We left the apartment while she was out. She'd been notified through her lawyer. There was nothing left to say. No dramatic farewell. No begging or bargaining. I drove until the city lights disappeared behind us and didn't stop until we reached the coast. I rented a small house near the sea, just me and my son. Fresh air, open sky, silence. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. I watched him crawl across the new living room floor, chasing after a toy car, laughing like nothing had ever gone wrong in his tiny world. And maybe that was the point. I hadn't saved my marriage, but I had saved my son. The days after we moved were strange, quiet in a way I hadn't experienced in years. There were no slamming doors, no forced conversations, no tension hiding under every "I'm fine." Just the ocean outside our window, the soft creak of floorboards, and the sound of my son's laughter echoing through the house. He adapted faster than I did. Maybe that's the beauty of being so young. You don't carry the weight of what came before. You just exist in the moment. Eat, sleep, smile, cry. And somehow, in the rhythm of his little life, I found something that felt like healing. I spent my mornings cooking him breakfast, feeding him with one hand, while sipping cold coffee with the other. We'd take walks along the beach when the air was still cool, his small body bundled in a jacket 2 sizes too big. I'd tell him stories, even though he couldn't understand, just to hear my own voice say something soft again. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at him, his tiny fingers gripping mine, the way his eyes lit up when he saw a bird or a dog, and I'd wonder how close I came to losing all of this. My phone stayed silent most days. I blocked her number after the third message. The first was a picture of our son from a visit, one of the few supervised meetings the court allowed. She wrote, "He's growing so fast. I miss him." The second was a voice memo, drunken, slurred. Something about how she never meant to mess things up, how she'd do anything to fix it. And the third, the one that made me block her, simply said, "You're punishing me, not protecting him. Admit it." That message told me everything I needed to know. She still didn't get it. It was never about punishment. It was about safety, stability, peace. She wanted forgiveness, not change. Weeks turned into a month. Then 2. Life settled. I found freelance work I could do from home, design jobs, editing gigs, whatever paid. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. Enough to buy food, pay rent, and keep the lights on. My days were full. Not easy, not always smooth, but full in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. One afternoon, while my son napped at his crib, I sat on the porch and just listened to the wind. I realized I hadn't heard yelling in over a month. No accusations. No guilt-tripping. No cold shoulders or fake apologies. Just quiet. I didn't miss her. Not really. What I missed was the idea of her. The version I thought I had, the partner, the teammate, the woman who used to laugh at me over burnt pancakes and call me her best friend. That woman hadn't been around for a long time. Maybe she never was. Then one morning I got a letter, official looking, from a lawyer. I opened it slowly, my heart already tightening before I read the first word. She was filing for joint custody. I sat down, reread it, blinked. She wanted shared parenting time, weekends, holidays, decision-making authority. After everything, after the night she disappeared, after the house with strangers, the crying in court, the judge's ruling, after she gave up the right to even hold him without supervision. Now she wanted equal. I called my lawyer. She's got no case, he said firmly. Not unless something's changed on her end. Has it? No idea, I said. We haven't spoken since the last supervised visit, and she missed the last one. She'll need to prove she's stable now. Employed, clean, consistent. If she can't, the judge won't even entertain it. Still, the thought stuck with me like a thorn. What if she tried harder this time? What if she cleaned up, played the role, showed up dressed nicely, and said all the right words? Courts were strange that way, always trying to be fair to both sides. But sometimes fairness wasn't justice, and sometimes justice wasn't safe. I wasn't going to let her gamble with our son again. I started keeping notes again. Everything. What time he woke up, what he ate, doctor visits, play dates. I signed us up for a local parenting group. Not because I needed advice, though sometimes I did, but because I needed witnesses. I needed to build a life around him that no one could question. If she was going to drag us back into court, I wanted to walk in with truth on my side, not just arguments, not just memories. Proof that I was the one raising him, that I was the one who stayed. A month later, she showed up to her visit looking different. New clothes, hair brushed, sober, polished, even. She brought a stuffed toy and a laminated meal plan she claimed she'd been following. The supervisor nodded approvingly. I felt something dark coil in my chest. She looked at me as we left and said, "See? I'm trying." I didn't respond, because it wasn't about effort. Not anymore. It was about trust. And hers had been broken beyond repair. One evening, after a particularly long day, I watched my son fall asleep in my arms. His breath was warm against my neck. His tiny hand curled around my shirt like it belonged there. And I whispered, more to myself than to him, "No one is taking you from me. Not now. Not ever." The court date loomed like a storm cloud, and though no official decision had been made yet, I could feel her creeping back into our lives. It wasn't the same woman who stumbled home at dawn reeking of vodka and perfume. No, this version of her was calculated, repackaged, rebranded. She was early to every visit now. Hair straightened, makeup clean, clothes modest. She brought new toys, fruit snacks, a sippy cup labeled with our son's name. She asked the supervisor questions about his sleep routine, allergies, favorite lullabies. It was like watching someone audition for a role they once threw away. And I hated how convincing she was. Because if I didn't know her, truly know her, I might have believed it, too. But I did know her. I knew the look in her eyes when she wanted something. I'd seen it when she begged me to let her go out that night. I'd seen it when she swore nothing happened. I'd seen it when she tried to twist the blame into something I did wrong. This wasn't remorse. It was strategy. The night before our next hearing, I barely slept. My lawyer said we had a solid case. Past rulings rarely changed unless something dramatic shifted. But he also reminded me, courts love redemption stories. If she plays the part right, they may try to give her a second chance. I stared at the ceiling for hours, the sound of the ocean beyond our windows, doing nothing to quiet the storm inside me. What scared me wasn't that she might fool the judge. It was that one day she might fool our son. At the hearing, she wore soft colors, pale pink, no jewelry, hair in a low bun. Her lawyer spoke first, presenting a packet of documents. Proof of employment, negative drug tests, a glowing character reference from her cousin. She has demonstrated meaningful change, he said. She simply wants to be part of her child's life again. That's not a crime. It's a mother's right. My jaw clenched. The judge turned to me. Mr. Lane, your response? I stood slowly, my hand shaking only slightly now. I'd been preparing for this. She doesn't want to be part of his life, I said. She wants control. The same control she had when she walked out at midnight and left a 1-year-old behind. The same control she tried to reclaim when she realized I wasn't waiting for her. She's changed, her lawyer interrupted. She's pretending, I said. She's treating this courtroom like a stage. I've spent the last 4 months raising our son alone. I have the records, the witnesses, the pediatrician statements. I've been there, every day, every hour. I paused, letting the silence weigh on the room. She's had 4 visits, for supervised hours. She brings toys, smiles, says the right things. But parenting isn't 4 hours a week. It's midnight fevers. It's panic when the baby stops breathing. It's bills and diapers, and choosing your child over your own desires. The judge nodded once, then looked down at his notes. Her lawyer whispered something to her, and for the first time that day, she looked small. The court didn't rule that day. They rarely do. It would take another week for the decision to come through. But as I stepped outside into the afternoon sun, I felt something shift. She didn't chase after me this time. She didn't beg. She just stood there on the courthouse steps, staring at the ground like she knew she'd lost more than just time. That week was long. She didn't show up to her next visit. No call. No message. The supervisor texted me, confused. I wasn't. I knew her patterns too well. If she couldn't win, she'd retreat. The final decision came in an envelope marked confidential. My hand shook as I opened it, breath caught in my throat. Full custody retained. No visitation unless initiated and approved by a custodial parent. No more supervised visits. No more courtrooms. Just peace. I sat down on the couch, the letter in one hand, my son playing on the floor in front of me. He was stacking blocks, clapping proudly every time one didn't fall. Good job, I whispered, not just to him, to both of us. That night, I made us a special dinner. Mac and cheese, his favorite. He smeared half of it across his face, giggling the whole time. After I bathed him and put him in fresh pajamas, I sat with him in the rocking chair by the window. The stars were just coming out. You don't know what happened, I said softly, and I hope you never really have to. But I want you to know I fought for you, every minute. His head rested on my chest, warm and still, and in that moment, I didn't feel like a man who'd been left. I felt like a man who'd stayed. 3 months passed. The court battles were behind us. Her messages stopped. Her visits stopped. She faded from our lives like a bad dream we'd finally woken up from. At first, I expected her to reappear, to storm back in with some new excuse or legal demand. But nothing came, just silence. And I began to realize that was her answer. When things weren't on her terms, she disappeared. I didn't feel triumphant, just tired. But also, for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. We began to build something new, not just a routine, a life. Our morning started slowly. My son would crawl into my bed just after sunrise, hair messy, his tiny fingers clutching his blanket. We'd lie there for a while, watching the sky lighten through the curtains. Sometimes he'd babble nonsense stories. Sometimes he'd just lay quietly against my chest, warm and steady like a heartbeat I'd never known I needed. I worked from home when I could, set deadlines during his naps, took calls with him in my lap, pointing at my laptop screen like he was my assistant. It wasn't easy, but it was real, and somehow it was enough. Every small victory, him learning a new word, finishing his food without a fuss, falling asleep without tears, felt like a win we both earned. There were hard days, of course, days when he was sick, and I was running on 2 hours of sleep, trying to juggle work, laundry, and tantrums. Days when I missed adult conversation, or felt like I was disappearing into the role of just dad. But even on those days, I never once wished for the past. That version of our life was gone, and I wasn't going back. One Sunday, we were at a small park by the ocean. He was toddling through the sand, chasing seagulls with a laugh, so bright it made strangers smile. I watched from a bench, coffee in hand, feeling that rare moment of stillness, like the world had paused just to give me a breath. That's when she showed up, not in person, but her shadow did. A woman, early 30s maybe, approached me slowly, cautious. She had dark hair, a kind face, a toddler on her hip. "Hi," she said. "Are you Jacob's dad?" I stood up, wary. "Yeah." "Why?" She smiled nervously. "I'm sorry if this is weird. My name's Elena. I used to know your ex-wife." That word hit me like a brick. I hadn't heard anyone call her that out loud before. "We worked together back on the island," she added. "She used to show me pictures of Jacob all the time." I nodded slowly. "Okay." She was complicated. Elena said carefully, "But I always knew she loved him. She just didn't know how to handle life the way it was." I looked at her son. "You a single parent too?" She gave a dry laugh. "Yeah, different story, but probably just as messy." We talked for a while. About parenting. About exhaustion. About how no one really prepares you for how lonely and amazing it can be all at once. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness. Not for my ex. But maybe understanding. Some people aren't built for this. For sacrifice. For constancy. For the long, unglamorous work of raising human. But I was. Elena and I saw each other again. At first by accident. Then by choice. Park meetups. Coffee walks. Playdates that stretched into long, quiet evenings where the kids played, and we talked about everything and nothing. She never asked for details about what happened with my ex, and I never pressed about hers. We weren't rushing anything. We were just present, and that was enough. One night, I stood at the doorway of Jacob's room, watching him sleep, one hand clinging to a stuffed bear, his little chest rising and falling like waves. I thought about how far we'd come. From the night she walked out, to the house with strangers, to the courtroom, to the fear, to this, the quiet, the peace, the promise of something better. He didn't know the storm he'd been pulled from, and maybe that was the best outcome of all, that he could grow up without ever feeling the weight of what almost tore us apart. I closed the door softly and walked into the living room, where Elena was sipping tea, her son asleep in her lap. She looked up at me and smiled. Not the kind of smile that asks for anything. Just one that says, "I'm here." And for the first time in years, I believed things might actually be okay. Maybe not perfect, but real. And that was enough for me. I used to count time by court dates, sleepless nights, and the silence that followed every argument. Now, I measured time differently, by the way Jacob said "da-da" with a giggle, or how the light fell through the kitchen window while he mashed bananas in his tiny fists. The storm had passed. We were still here. And slowly, I began to let go of the part of me that had been bracing for more damage. Elena never pushed. That was something I didn't expect, and something I hadn't realized I needed. She was content to exist in the spaces I offered. Some days, we'd talk for hours while our kids played. Other times, she'd simply send a message. "You okay today?" No demands. No pressure. Just quiet presence. We were both too tired for games. Too experienced in loss to pretend we had anything to prove. One evening, we were sitting on the porch after dinner. The kids had finally worn each other out and were asleep in their rooms. A cool breeze slipped through the open windows, bringing in the scent of salt and jasmine. "You ever think you'd end up like this?" she asked. I took a sip from my mug and gave a small laugh. Like what? Full-time dad with an emotional support toddler and a PTSD calendar of court appointments. She smiled, then looked down at her hands. "No, I meant peaceful." That word hit harder than I expected. Peaceful. I hadn't called my life that in years. But it was. Maybe not in the storybook sense. No big house, no perfect marriage, no 2 incomes and a dog life. But it was calm, steady, honest. And that was more than I ever thought I'd get again. Jacob changed, too. He laughed more, slept better, cried less at night. Sometimes I'd wonder how much of the chaos he had absorbed before, what his little brain had felt in the tension between me and her. He couldn't speak it then, but I could see the difference now, in how easily he trusted, and how much lighter he seemed. He was becoming a boy, strong-willed, curious, loud in the best way. He'd fall, cry, get up, then do the exact same thing again. Maybe he got that from me. A few weeks later, out of nowhere, I got a message from her. It wasn't aggressive. No demands. No manipulations. Just a photo of Jacob as a newborn. No caption. No context. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't respond. What was there to say? That she missed him? That she'd thrown it all away? That no photo, no matter how soft the lighting or innocent the smile, could erase what she chose to abandon? I didn't need to reopen that wound. I deleted the message. Elena and I kept seeing each other. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the traditional sense. But it was real. She understood things most people wouldn't. Like how strange it felt to raise a child alone, and yet never truly be alone. How there were days you'd trade everything for one uninterrupted nap, and others where one belly laugh from your kid could carry you for hours. One night, after we put the kids to sleep, she stayed a little longer than usual. We were sitting on the couch, watching some mindless cooking show neither of us was actually paying attention to. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "I like it here," she said softly. I didn't move, didn't flinch. "I like you here," I whispered back. We didn't kiss that night. No fireworks, no swelling music, just comfort, and that was enough. I started writing again. Not professionally, just notes, letters, scraps of thoughts scribbled in a journal I hadn't touched in years. I wrote letters to Jacob. He might read one day. I wrote about what I felt when he took his first steps, how my chest tightened every time he called me Dad, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I wrote about fear, about anger, about how I'd almost let bitterness become my identity. And I wrote about her, not Elena, the woman who left, but this time not out of pain, not to blame. I wrote just to let it out, so it wouldn't stay inside me anymore. One morning, Jacob woke up early and climbed into my bed. The sky was still pale gray, the house quiet. He curled up beside me and whispered, "Love you, Daddy." 3 words. Small, simple, but they broke something open inside me. And suddenly I knew I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living, really living. There's a difference between surviving and living. I didn't realize how long I'd been stuck in survival mode. Always looking over my shoulder, bracing for the next fight, the next court hearing, the next excuse. But now, months after the dust had settled, I found myself in unfamiliar territory, a life that no longer revolved around damage control. And it was quiet here, peaceful. Sometimes that peace felt almost suspicious, like a silence too deep in a toddler's bedroom. You assume something's about to go wrong, but nothing did. Not anymore. Jacob was thriving. Every day brought something new, a word, a habit, a tantrum, a discovery. His laughter had weight now, his voice more certain. He wasn't just reacting to the world. He was stepping into it. And I followed, grateful, always a few steps behind, just trying to keep up. He called Elena Nina. She never corrected him. She didn't try to replace anything. She never told him what she was to him, or what they were supposed to be. She just showed up day after day, with steady kindness and gentle care. And slowly, he folded her into his world the way children do, without suspicion, without fear, just acceptance. And I let her fold into mine. One rainy afternoon, we were stuck inside, toys scattered across the floor, cartoons humming in the background. Elena was reading on the couch while Jacob built a tower of blocks taller than his own head. "I think you're part of this now," I said suddenly, not looking up. She glanced over her book. "What do you mean?" "This life. Me. Him. All of it. I think you're part of it now." She closed the book softly. "I never want to push my way in." "I know," I said. "That's why it worked." She smiled at that, and I realized I hadn't felt nervous around her in a long time. No second-guessing. No walking on eggshells. Just ease. Later that week, I got another message from her. Blocked number. New account. Just a single line. He'll forget me if you don't tell him who I am. I stare at the screen, letting the words sit like poison in my palm. Maybe that was true. Maybe he would forget. But not because I made him. Because she left. Because he was growing up in a world where she was an echo, not a presence. I didn't respond. Some things didn't deserve a reply. The next morning, Jacob and I walked to the market while the sky still carried the soft chill of dawn. He rode in the stroller, one sock missing, waving at every passing dog like they were celebrities. At one point, he looked up and asked, "Daddy, you happy?" I stopped walking. I looked down at his messy curls, his peanut butter-stained jacket, the way his smile held no baggage, and I realized I was happy. Not the kind of happy that shouts or shines, but the kind that hums in your chest when everything is finally okay. A few nights later, Elena stayed after bedtime. Jacob had fallen asleep with his hand on her arm, and she didn't move until he was fully out. We ended up on the balcony with a bottle of wine and a blanket over our legs. "You don't talk about her much anymore," she said gently. "I don't think about her much anymore," I replied. "Do you miss her?" I thought for a moment. I miss who I thought she was, but not who she turned out to be. She nodded. "And you?" I asked. "Do you ever miss him?" Her eyes softened. I miss the hope, not the person. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't need to. Something passed between us anyway, silent and complete, a kind of agreement, a promise that didn't need words. We weren't trying to fill old spaces with new people. We were building something from scratch. And maybe, just maybe, that's what love actually looked like when it was done right. A week later, Jacob had a fever. Nothing serious, but enough to throw our little world off balance. Elena stayed the night without me asking. She made tea, took shifts holding him, danced around the kitchen, whispering lullabies when he refused to sleep. I watched her in the half-dark and thought, she belongs here. Not because she made a grand gesture, but because she stayed through the small, hard moments, because she didn't run. In the quiet days that followed, I found myself making space, in drawers and routines and plans, not to erase what had happened before, but to finally stop making it the center of my life. I still had scars, but I wasn't living inside them anymore. The first time Elena stayed through the night, really stayed, was the night Jacob threw up all over the hallway floor at 2 a.m. We were both exhausted. I had just changed the sheets for the second time, and she was on her knees wiping down the tiles while whispering soft words to keep him calm. After it was over and he was finally back asleep, we sat on the kitchen floor, backs against the fridge, sharing a cup of cold tea like soldiers after a battle. "You know," I murmured, "most people would have left by now." She smiled without looking at me. "I'm not most people." That was the first time I realized I didn't just want her around. I needed her, and that terrified me. For weeks after that, I found myself pulling back just slightly, not from her presence, but from the future I saw forming in the space between us, the soft shape of a life I wasn't sure I deserved. Or maybe when I was afraid to lose all over again. It wasn't that I didn't trust her. I just didn't trust good things to stay. She noticed, of course. She didn't push. But one evening after dinner, she sat across from me with Jacob playing between us and asked gently, "Are you okay with all this?" I looked at her, really looked. The woman who came into our lives with no promises, no expectations, just steady kindness and patience. "I am," I said, "more than okay. I think I'm still learning how to believe it." She nodded. "That's fair." And then she did something no one else ever had. She reached across the table, took my hand, and said nothing at all. Jacob started calling her Mama Nina. The first time he said it, my heart stopped. Elena froze, too, her hand still mid-motion, passing him a cup of juice. She didn't correct him, just looked at me with wide, uncertain eyes, like she was asking for permission without saying a word. I nodded, because maybe she hadn't given birth to him, but she'd earned that name in every possible way. And I could see what it meant to her. Not pride, not victory, but something quieter, something sacred. She held that moment like it was glass, afraid it might break. Then one day, the past showed up again, not through a message, not through the courts, in person. I was loading groceries into the trunk outside a small market when I heard her voice, soft, careful, like someone approaching a wild animal. "Hi." I turned and saw her, Jacob's biological mother, standing 5 feet away, thinner, hair shorter, different energy, but still her. I instinctively looked into the car window. Jacob was strapped into his seat, humming to himself, completely unaware. "I just wanted to see him," she said quickly. "From a distance. I'm not trying to make trouble." "You shouldn't be here," I said. My voice came out low. Even, "I know. She blinked hard. "He looks happy. He looks safe." I didn't respond. She took a step back. "That's all. I just needed to see it for myself." And then she walked away. I didn't tell Elena right away. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I wasn't sure how to frame it, what words to use, what parts even mattered. When I finally did tell her, days later, she nodded slowly and said, "You handled it. That's all I need to know." That trust, the way she didn't spiral, didn't question, it was new to me, and it made me feel something I hadn't in a long time. Safe. That weekend, I took them both to the beach. The wind was warm, the waves gentle. Jacob ran in circles around us, chasing foam and laughing until he fell face first into the sand and came up spitting grit. I watched Elena scoop him up, laughing too, brushing the sand from his cheeks like she'd been doing it forever. And in that moment, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel guilt or doubt or anger. I felt ready to let go, to move forward, to finally let the light in. That night, after Jacob was asleep in the house had settled into its soft nighttime rhythm, I turned to her in the dim kitchen and said, "You've done more for him than anyone ever has." She looked up from the sink, brow furrowed slightly. "I just love him." "I know," I said, "and you love me, even when I don't always know how to let you." She stepped closer, her hand still damp from the dishwater, and rested her forehead against mine. "I'm not leaving," she whispered, "no matter how slow you need to go." I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I believed someone when they said that. I didn't expect to hear from her again. After that day outside the market, I thought she'd said what she needed to say and vanished for good. But 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name, written in handwriting I hadn't seen in over a year. The envelope was thin, 1 page, folded neatly, like she rehearsed every word before putting pen to paper. I didn't open it right away. It sat on the kitchen counter for a full day. Then, too, Elena didn't ask. She saw it, saw my expression, and just said quietly, "Take your time." On the 3rd night, after Jacob was asleep and the house was still, I finally opened it. "I know I have no right to ask for anything, not even your time. But I want you to read this because I want you to understand what I couldn't say back then. I was broken, not in the way people use as an excuse, but in the way that eats you from inside until you don't even recognize a reflection in the mirror. I didn't hate being a mother. I hated that I couldn't do it right, that I wasn't enough. And the more you stepped up, the more I shrank. I told myself I needed space, freedom, fun. But the truth is, I didn't know how to stay. I didn't know how to be loved without eventually destroying it. I saw you with him that day, saw how you held him, how safe he looked. And for the first time, I understood what love really was. Not performance, not possession, just presence. You were there, even when I wasn't. I know he won't remember me. And maybe that's for the best, but I'll remember him. Always. Thank you for protecting him, and for letting him forget me in peace. Her name. Just that. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into the envelope. Then I placed it in the drawer where I kept Jacob's birth certificate, immunization records, and a lock of his baby hair I couldn't bring myself to throw away. Not to keep her close, just to remind myself how far we'd come. The next morning, I told Elena. We were walking by the shore, Jacob skipping ahead with his bucket, looking for shells. She wrote me a letter. I said, Elena didn't look surprised, just waited. She said goodbye, really goodbye. I paused. It felt final. That's good, she said. You deserve a clean ending. I'm not sure anything's ever clean. No, she agreed, but it can be quiet, and that's a start. Later that day, I sat with Jacob in his room as he stacked books into a lopsided tower. I watched him for a long time, his hands still chubby, his words still half-formed, but his heart already so full of trust. He didn't know about the letter. He didn't need to, but one day, if he asked, if he wanted to understand where he came from, I would show it to him, not to hurt him, not to shame her, but because he had the right to know that even broken love can leave behind something honest. Spring crept in quietly. The windows stayed open longer. The smell of salt air mixed with blooming jasmine. Jacob started sleeping with one foot outside the blanket, as if even in his dreams he needed to feel free. And I finally stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, because it already had, and we were still standing. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Jacob between us with spaghetti sauce on his chin, Elena looked at me across the flickering candlelight and said, "You know we're a family now, right?" I nodded. "I do. Not just you and him. Not just me joining your story. It's ours now. All of it." I reached for her hand. "Yeah," I said. "It is." There was no proposal. No dramatic moment with a ring. Just a quiet Sunday morning, Jacob asleep between us, and a conversation that unfolded like a prayer. "If we did it," I whispered, "if we made this permanent, would you want that?" Elena turned to me, her eyes soft but certain. "Only if you're asking." "I am." She smiled. "Then yes." We didn't rush. We didn't post it on social media. We didn't buy a white dress or book a big venue. We just started saying we more often. We moved her things in slowly. A drawer, a shelf, a second toothbrush. And somewhere in that quiet blending, we stopped surviving and started building. 2 years passed. Not all at once, but slowly, in the way time moves when life finally stops feeling like something you're bracing against. Day by day, morning by morning, diaper by diaper, laugh by laugh. And before I knew it, Jacob wasn't a baby anymore. He was a boy. He ran instead of waddling, asked questions instead of pointing, threw tantrums with real arguments, not just wails. He had opinions about socks, about pancakes, about the best way to build a pillow fort. He called me Dad now, not Dada, and said it with the confidence of someone who knew that title belonged to me and no one else. Elena moved in completely last fall. We didn't celebrate with boxes or announcements. It just happened. Her shoes ended up by the door next to mine. Her mug became the one I used without thinking. And one morning, I opened the closet and realized half the hangers held clothes that weren't mine anymore. She never forced her way in. She simply became part of the house. And we never looked back. We got married the following spring. Just the three of us, barefoot on the beach. Jacob wore a crooked bow tie and held both our hands as we said our vows. No guests, no music, just waves and wind and a little boy between two people who had learned, the hard way, what love actually meant. I promised Elena not perfection, but honesty. She promised me not ease, but presence. And Jacob, without prompting, whispered, "I love you both," like he was sealing something ancient and sacred. Sometimes I still thought about the past, not out of pain, but like someone touching a scar they no longer flinch from. The letter stayed in that drawer. I never opened it again. It didn't need rereading. It had done its job. She never reached out after that. I don't know where she is. And for the first time in years, I don't wonder, because I'm not angry anymore. She gave me pain, yes, but she also gave me Jacob, and he became the anchor I didn't know I needed. Jacob started school this year. On the first day, he ran ahead of us toward the classroom door, backpack bouncing, hair still damp from our rush morning routine. Then he turned around, ran back, and hugged me tight around the waist. "Promise you'll be here when I come out?" he asked. "Always," I said, because now I could promise that. Because I wasn't surviving anymore. I was home. Our house isn't perfect. The roof creaks when it rains. The dishwasher makes a weird sound we still haven't fixed. Some days, we're too tired to talk after Jacob goes to bed, and we fall asleep on the couch with laundry half folded. But it's ours, and it's filled with laughter, warmth, forgiveness, and love that doesn't ask to be earned again every day. We have rituals now: pancakes on Sundays, ocean walks on Wednesdays, tucking Jacob in together. Even if one of us is exhausted, sometimes I wake up before both of them and just sit in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, listening to the quiet, not the silence of absence, but the hush of a house that's full, loved, and at peace. And I think back to man I was, standing in that kitchen, holding a baby, watching the woman he trusted walk out the door. If I could tell him one thing, it would be this: you will lose what you thought mattered, but you'll find what actually does. There's a photo on our wall now, just the three of us, wind in our hair, sand on our feet, sunlight in our eyes. It's not picture perfect, but it's real, and it's enough. It's everything.